Welcome to the Pebble in My Shoe. I'm Miffy Hode, your host here, and each episode I'm in conversation with my guests about the pebble in their shoe that has nudged them to choose a life that aligns them closer to their truth and authentic self. The pebble in my shoe is an analogy for an inner niggle or knowing that becomes so insistent that we have to pay attention. We can ignore it only for so long and eventually have to stop to investigate it, listen to it, and honor what it's telling us. It becomes a catalyst for action to change something that no longer serves us. This can be something internal, like a belief or mindset. It can be about how we behave in certain situations or relationships, or it can be something that changes our life trajectory, like ending a relationship, changing careers, or moving to a different place. Taking the action and making the change invariably requires courage, often a leap of faith, and at the very least, to try something new and outside of our comfort zone. Whatever the action or change happens to be, the pebble ultimately moves us to live more authentically, more aligned to our true nature. My intention for the conversations here is to inspire or offer hope to those of you who resonate with the stories shared, that you'll hear something that supports you on your own journey, and if there's a pebble in your shoe, that you'll find the courage to make the changes that align you closer with your authentic self. Thank you for being here, and let me introduce today's guest. Marion Tierney is a card reader, combining the tarot and oracle cards, which she says gives a person an intuitive spiritual soul reading and offers practical guidance. She also offers shamanic healings with a special interest in ancestral healing, house and land healing, and she loves to visit sacred sites and is drawn to healing the land and homes. She recently completed her shamanic counsellor training and is an energy healer too, providing Usui and Amadeus Reiki, also Rahanni, working with the celestial pink angels and higher beings. She's a Reiki Master. She has a connection with animals, especially dogs and horses, and offers healing services to the animal kingdom. She uses crystals in her healing practices and often makes crystal grids with intentions in the land she visits when required. She lives in Ballinrobe in Co Mayo and frequently gives readings at holistic fairs and events. I'm happy to introduce her as my guest today on the Pebble in My Shoe. So you're very welcome, Marion. I'm really grateful to you for being a guest on the Pebble in My Shoe.
And it's great to be here.
Yeah. So can you just give us a little bit of an overview, Marion, of who you are and where you are and what you do?
Well, I'm from Mayo. I'm from a place called Ballinrobe in the South Mayo, and I'm an intuitive card reader and energy healer, shamanic practitioner, and I have other interests as well in that area. And I came across you on the Mumpas network, and it was probably great, which is a great area to meet like-minded people. So, and your podcasts are wonderful. So thanks for having me.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. Because I know we had a lovely conversation on the phone a few weeks ago, Marion, ahead of this. And I know that you have, in your lifetime experienced lots of sort of your intuition guiding you. So I'd be really interested to hear more about that. On the podcast, we were talking about the pebble in the shoe as an analogy for those nudges and for those pivotal moments in our life that can change the course of our life or change direction or just gently nudge us towards something that we're meant to be doing. And we're not always conscious of it. But I'd just be curious to kind of explore that with you, if that's all right. To take me back to, when you first started to realize that your intuition was at play.
Well, the first time I actually properly noticed it was when my dad was sick and he was about to pass away. And I suppose that was a challenging time anyways for everybody involved. But the morning that he was passing, I remember us all having breakfast in the restaurant across the way from the hospital in Galway. And for some apparent reason, I couldn't finish my breakfast, which was fine. And I thought, well, maybe I just have enough or whatever it is. So anyways, I returned back to the room and I remember everyone started coming back after me. And within an hour or so, he had passed away. And the sun was split in the stones outside. But I hadn't connected that as an intuition. I just thought, oh, I have to get back. At the time, I was only, what am I now? I'm 40, I'm 43. So I was about 20 at the time. Yeah, so it was 23 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
there was other moments then shortly after with these other siblings that had passed away that I was quite close to. And I noticed them nudges as well. But I just thought it was a coincidence at the time more than anything else. Yeah.
Can I ask you though about those nudges and how they felt, let's say, or what was it? I know you're saying that you didn't realize at the time that they were nudges necessarily, or that it was your intuition, but there was something, wasn't there? Some kind of a message coming through. And I'm just curious about what that was for you.
There was definitely something there. I probably hadn't the words put on it at the time. I didn't realize what it was. But as time went on, I suppose it was like a clearing away. So, like, as I've got to understand the work of what I'm doing now, like, there's so many different clears. I can't remember how many exactly, but I'd call it an inner knowing.
Yeah.
So sometimes I might just feel it in my stomach when I go into a room and I could feel something that way. So I know there's something not right. Or I was on an Instagram live the other evening and I was just pulling cards for people to interact with them. And in one instance, this lady down in Cork, I was just pulled a card for her and I got a headache, slight pressure on my head. Now that I knew that wasn't mine. So that was a
Right.
different nudge, but I was able to say it and I was comfortable where I was. And she had no problem to come back and tell me what it was about, that it was
Yeah.
definitely hers. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So there's something in there about your body being able to, let's say, translate the message or translate the energy that you're
yeah.
picking up into something that you can then sort of
Mm,
explain to somebody. Yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, you're an energy healer, right?
mm,
So can you take
mm.
me back to your working life and sort of what you started out doing and where that led?
Oh, I started working in, well, my first job was in a supermarket. So you get to know people that way. And
Mm.
their verbal cues and different things. But there was nothing coming up at that time when I was doing that because I was only 16. But then I went on to do a secretarial course when my father wasn't well at the time. I had started another course and I left it because I knew I needed to be closer to him at the time, I suppose. I wasn't able to put in the effort in the other one. So then I went into different customer service roles. I got to know people over the phone. So you're picking up on different things from different people that way as well. And I remember one day actually I was working in a customer service role in Galway and there was this elderly lady on the phone and she was having a big chat to me and oh my God, she didn't know me from a hole in the wall and
Mm.
she was inviting me up to her house. And I thought, oh God, there's something not right here. So, anyways, as I got to the end of the chat, and my friends that are coming up to me, oh, we need to go to lunch. Like this is beyond lunch. And I says, leave me a minute. I've this nearly sorted because I'd seen a frequent or sequence of events on her notes that she was ringing quite a lot, but I didn't know what it was about, and she was making out it was home insurance or her car or whatever. Anyways, basically what it came down to was the woman was lonely. Yeah.
Okay.
And nobody else had spotted it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just big note up that this is why she's ringing. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, granted, she'd be ringing for renewals at the right time of the year, but here she was ringing in between. So she had somebody to talk to. Yeah. So I suppose that was one indication.
Yeah. And what would you call that, Marion? That ability or what you're picking up on, like,
Well, that was probably a bit of my intuition probably stepped in there because I knew there was something wrong, but I didn't know
yeah,
what it was. Yeah. But I just thought
yeah,
it a bit strange that she'd invite a stranger up to her house in Dublin. She didn't know who she was talking to.
yeah, yeah.
So that was a little nudge in a small way that I hadn't recognized before. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose for me, what I'm hearing in there is also your capacity for empathy and really hearing a person beyond their words, right? And
Yes,
beyond what is kind of at face value looks like just a lady who's sort of making all these unnecessary phone calls, whereas you were able to
yes,
see what the function was of those calls for her.
yeah. I've been told I have an awful amount of patience when I'm talking to people on the phone, and I
Okay.
obviously am able to pull it out of them, kind of. I'll, without even knowing I'm doing it, I'll find the information, and
Yeah.
then that led me to a couple of years later then to turn around and go back to college to train as a social care practitioner. So I was
Okay.
working with people with disability after that. So then you're working with different kinds of ability that mightn't have the same ways of communicating as ourselves. So you wouldn't
Uh-huh.
notice and pick up on things, or even coming into a house. To say if like I'd be a locum within the service, so you wouldn't be in the same house all the time. So you might be back a few months later, but you know a difference in the house as soon as you walk into it. Some
Right.
people wouldn't notice it, but I might feel it in my solar plexus,
Okay.
or there's something up. Yeah,
Yeah. What is it that you're picking up on?
probably connecting to the energies within the room. Or say now is another area of interest. I go to sacred sites, as I call them, or monastic sites, and I could walk in there, or even before I go in, I might ask, and it could be an old ruin of a church, and I will actually have my pendulum with me, and I will check the energy that way, and I'll ask, am I to step into this? Or like my legs would feel heavy.
Okay.
Like there's a lovely area near me called Moore Hall, and I went for a walk there a couple of years ago with my dog before he died. It was a gorgeous summer's day. It was so hot, and then it felt very heavy, a bit like today with the weather. And we were walking along, and my legs all of a sudden felt very heavy. So I picked it up that way. So I had my pendulum in my bag, and the dog is a terrier, so he could feel everything. He's right down to the ground anyway, so he can tell me. So I was putting it down. Well, it might be just the weather. So I said, is this the weather? And it said no. I was only getting it to confirm it for me more than anything, but it was to do with the energies around Moore Hall House itself. So I stuck to the walk rather than going in near the house at all if I could avoid it, because it's to do with the energy that's there in the land. And that happened to me in another site as well down in Clonfert. And like that, I must have picked up energy on my legs. And at the same time, I got an awful headache. Now it was really lifting. So that I had to get cleared as well afterwards. And recently as well, I went to Inchigeelagh Island, the bank holiday Monday, I think it was in June. And I'd been there years previous. But I said I go back this time with a different eye, a different way of seeing it, because I know a bit more about the land energy and the history of the place and what's going on. So like that, I went. I was testing my pendulum with the energies as well, and I went to the monastic site. There was two monasteries or churches in the island, and it was the bigger one that I picked up. The same thing happened like I had in Glenfert. I got an awful headache, and I said, "There's something not right here." So I said, "Where's this coming from?" And there was a big grave or crypt, whatever you want to call it, and there was some bishop in the 12th century, and he's buried in there, and it was something to do with him. But anyways, I said to myself, "I'm fine. I'll get back to my car once I get back off the boat." When I sat in the car, I did my Amadeus Reiki, the shamanic Reiki, and then I cleared it. So then I knew I was okay. Yeah,
Okay, so you were able to clear that from you, but what is the
yeah.
context, then, I suppose, for you picking up on that? Are you doing something as well for the bishop?
I think I was just connecting to the land itself, and I obviously picked up on it that way. But I was trying
Okay,
to decipher what was going on in that island because there's loads of history to it. So I said, there's obviously more there unless I go back. Or, but I know I'm not meant to fully. I don't know. Am I to clear that area, or is it something else I have to do? I'm still navigating all of that to an extent
okay,
because it happens in certain sites, not in every site. Yeah.
yeah. And I suppose what I'm curious about is that what is it that you're clearing? So is there a blockage in the energy on the land in the same way that we can have a blockage in our own energy, or
Yes. Yeah. So I went
okay,
I've gone to a site in Tubbercurry there a number of years ago, famine graveyard, and there was a workhouse in the housing estate where the housing estate is, just outside Tubbercurry. And in all my years traveling to college, I never saw the sign for the famine graveyard
Okay.
until lately. So anyways, I went in and I had a look around it, and the same thing happened to me again. I could feel it in my legs. So I placed rose quartz in the ground and I said, I'll come back to you. So basically I went back and I did ancestral healing on the land. I did it in my own way. I brought some crystals with the exorcism symbol put into it. I had my holy water, sage, prayers to the ancestors, my drum. So I went drumming, and I was there with somebody else, and he was helping me out. And now we got drenched wet as well, the same for most of it. And just as we were finishing, the sky was beginning to clear. And whatever way I looked up, in the clouds was the word love. So I figured whoever I helped to pass over or that was stuck in some way, at least they were okay. Because I kept going around and I did my prayer and called it an Archangel Michael and whoever else I needed. And I told them that they needed, that any of them never felt that they weren't ready to cross over could do so now, that they were just basically stuck for whatever reason that was. Yeah. So that was the other way I did it. So that was like a little land clearing I did. Yeah.
Yeah. By the sound of it, it was more than the land clearing as well. So there were earthbound spirits there or that who needed help as well. Yeah. So at this point, Marion, we need to do a bit of rewinding because we've jumped from you training as a social care worker up in their houses through to you doing some shamanic work in graveyards and things and famine sites. So let's go in the blanks here, because you didn't just jump from social care to shamanic practitioner in a fell swoop. So can you talk me through journey, because there's a gap there.
There is a big gap there.
So what was the pebble in your shoe, I suppose, when you were in social care that was nudging you towards this work?
I was in a stressful situation and at work, and at that time I took a few months out because I was burnt out and stressed. And during that time I said, oh, maybe I should learn Reiki. So Reiki kind of opened me up. So I did 1 and 2, I think, that year. And then I took interest in where should I go next. And I had a friend at the time, and she introduced me to I think it was a tarot deck or an oracle deck. I can't remember which. And she said, give that a shuffle and see how you go and pick a card for me. And I didn't think anything about it. And then, so I did it. And then somebody else bought me a deck. And then I said, there's something in this. So anyways, I kept going with it, and I started journaling with the decks and getting used to the deck and put my energy into it. And so I started reading on myself, I'd say for about a year and a half. And in the meantime, then I started doing the shamanic training. So within that year and a half, so I wasn't doing it all by myself. So within the shamanic training, there was a divination module. So I looked at the pendulum, looked at different methods of divination as well. And the cards is one of them. Sure, as soon as I see a deck of cards and somebody hands them to me, I'm like, yes, I'll play with them. So yeah.
For any of our listeners that don't know what divination is, so it's using a tool to interpret the energy or to deliver a message. That's how I would define it anyway.
That would be a very good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically a tool. Like you could hand me a photograph and ask me to connect to your family member and see could I pick up one thing on it, even though I haven't done it that way. But that could be something. Yeah.
Yeah, because my dad he's passed away a long time now, but my dad used to divine for water, and what he would use was hazel rods.
Oh, right.
And he would hold them in his hands and they would be pointing straight out from him. And he'd walk the land, and where the rods would cross would be an indicator that there was water underground, because there's the water table, there's streams of water underground. So then he would be able to map out where the water was underground on a property, let's say. And sometimes there'd be water streams running under a house, let's say. And sometimes the energy that's generated by the flowing water can disrupt the energy then in the home. And for example, I remember him helping a gentleman who had awful pains in his legs. And there seemed to be no way of curing these pains this man had in his legs, and there was no evidence of anything else. Anyway, the long and short of it was that my dad divined for the water under the ground, and it turned out that it was flowing underneath, where this man's bed was. And so his legs were in the stream of energy all night, every night. And so he moved the bed, and my dad had a way of, as far as I remember, he would have a way of sticking metal spikes into the lines of energy either side of a house where it was flowing in and flowing out, let's say, to sort of diminish it or to lessen it. So anyway, that it's just another example, I suppose, of the energetics of the earth that we might not necessarily be aware of, but the divination tools can be helpful. And you're talking about the pendulum there, which is another way of getting an answer, sort of a yes, no, positive, negative answer to a question that you might pose. And I know a lot of people that work with energies use them. So just curious then, Marion, to ask you about, obviously you had an interest in order to come into that, and you said how you were burnt out in your job, and that was what kind of led you towards Reiki and so on. How did that help you personally?
As I moved into the shamanic training, because it was a 12-month course, but each month you're delving into the layers, so you're going within yourself and learning about yourself and healing yourself. So that was helping me. Even though I was still in the same job at the time, I was very stressed. And it took another year for me to finally move out. But when I did get COVID, I think it was a few months later that I decided to move out of that job altogether, because I was so exhausted. And then with the COVID, made me so tired. I said, I can't drive back to Galway. That's me done. So each month there was a layer and layers, and you're going back through it. So you're looking at different aspects of yourself, and you're connecting with the land. So you're healing with the land yourself as well. And like that, you were on about the divination with your father. We would have done gridding of a house. So that was part of our training. Yeah, so it was kind of similar to what your father would have done, except we would put some crystals in as well, in certain parts to help the house as well, the energies around it. So I think it's rose quartz and black tourmaline we used. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really diving deep. It's not a course that you'd want to be doing, oh my God, I'm going doing this just for the sake of it. You do it because you're meant to stick at it and the whole lot. It is really interesting.
Can I ask you, Marion, do you feel, let's say, a calling to this work, or how has that manifested for you in your life? That you're drawn to this, because it's not very typical, is it? I know there's lots of shamanic practitioners, and it's much more common than it used to be, but it's not sort of the traditional career choice of the average.
No, it's not. No, definitely not. I remember, this is going way back to my childhood now. I'm going back a few steps. But I remember going to the Usui caves on a school tour. And I remember coming home with a little bag of gemstones. So I was obviously drawn to crystals at the time too, and I didn't know it. And then before, I think I did the Reiki, or was it after? I went into a shop in Westport and I asked, how do you connect to a crystal that you know is for you? And the woman in the shop said, your hand will feel warm, and picking up the tumbles and the whole lot. And anyways, I ended up picking up one, and I was connected to it, and I got warm. So I asked her for the meaning, and there was a lady with me, and she listened to the meaning, and she said, that's you to a T at the moment. So she said, there's something in it. So I kept going. It's the same way with the deck of cards. I connect with your higher self when I'm doing the reading. And I've done them not only on personal readings, but for business professionals as well, where they need to go. And it's really interesting because you could start off with one question and I could layer it onto another question. And I mix the tarot and the oracle cards together. So the tarot is set deck, with the 70 plus cards in it, and the 21 or 22 major arcana cards are in it for different strong situations, you could say, that happen in a person's life. And the other four suits then are related to different, like the air, the money. Well, the air is your thought, sorry. The sword is your communication. The pentacles is your money, career. And the wands, I always connect with your what you're passionate about. So how you're building up or how you're carrying yourself forward in that area of your life. Whereas an oracle deck could have about 44 to 50 plus cards, but they're slightly different. But they connect in other ways. So I blend the two together in a reading. Yeah.
Okay. And I suppose that's helping you. They're the tools you use then to connect with the person's energy and the person's story.
Yes, exactly. I know two readings are ever the same either. Then, because I've a good range of oracle decks now and tarot decks, I bring a certain few oracle decks with me, and I stay with that on the day.
Yeah.
And even outside of that, people keep coming up to me having the angel decks, trying to bring more of them to the table as well. And now there is one shamanic oracle deck that I always bring. But funnily enough, everyone loves it when I show it. And they understand it as soon as I bring it to the table. Yeah. So it's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely. And I'm familiar with shamanic decks as well that have animals, because obviously with shamanism, the power animals are very prevalent, aren't they, as guides for us on our journeys and so on. And I know for me, I've had a couple of very strong animals in my life, one being heron and wolf. Wolf always shows up whenever I'm going through some major transition in my life. And more recently, bear has been showing up for me. But it's lovely. Wow. It's very comforting, I find. There's so many roads we could go on with this conversation, Marion, because I'm fascinated by it all. I'm very curious to hear about your experience with earthbound souls, partly because I have my own experience in that area, which I don't talk very much about, and I kind of work away at it quietly myself, because I've had some experiences with people where I have shared it, and the reaction has been then they treat you like you're some kind of oracle or crystal ball reader or something. They misinterpret kind of what it's about, and that I'm not those things. And for me, it's very much just something that I do quietly, because it happens that living human beings aren't actually involved in the process. So it's just about helping earthbound souls to move on, really. So I'm really curious then, Marion, to talk to you about your experience of that.
Where do I begin with that one? I just find when I'm connected to the land, sometimes I'm really connected to the people within it without realizing it. That's a start. I'm also, how does it start off? I might see a standing stone or a ruin of a church, let's say. So there's a church over the road from me on the way to Ballinrobe, and it's called Churchwater. And it was the old cemetery related to Roundfort, and Roundfort is connected. Roundfort in itself means that there's an awful lot of ring forts and fairy forts in the area. So we all know about the fairies. Anyways, I went over to that site one particular day because I was driving past it so many times, and I said, I have to go in. So I had my camera on my phone and I took pictures, and it wasn't until afterwards I noticed the little orbs in the picture. So there was definitely energies there. And then at the back of it, there was it unbaptized babies? I'm not sure, was it baptized or was it to do with the famine? I can't remember which one it was, but it was one of them anyway. So they were remembered at that ground as well. So I noticed it that way. But for some unknown reason, our intuition is coming in, and I'm like, I have to go back there. I have to look at that. It was the same way it's going to Inchigill. I had to go back and see, even though I was there about 10 years previous and I had no inclination what was going on in the place. And then when I went back, and what happened to me was a sure sign that there is spirits still there, most definitely.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to ask you about that knowing, that pull back to a place. Like, how does that manifest in you? What is it that happens for you that you have to go back?
Obviously, with that particular place over the road from me, I must have passed it, I don't know how many times. And I said, I kept saying, I have to pull up, I have to go in. So I made it my business to go in. So then I started actually another Sunday, I think it was around Easter time recently, and I went around the area of which I live, in Ballinrobe. And everyone and anyone that comes into Ballinrobe will always say in High Street Hill, it doesn't look at all appealing when you come into Ballinrobe. And I'm like, well, yeah, we all know that, state the obvious kind of thing. But there's obviously a reason. The more I looked at the reasons, it was to do with the buildings in the area and all the streets nearly. So when you're coming up High Street Hill, you're turning into the green, as we call it, the football pitch. There's a barracks down at the right at the end, and it was an RIC barracks, I think, years ago. It's just a room. But before that room was ever there, there was a castle in Ballinrobe, going back centuries. So that was levelled, and they built this. So there's twice as much earthbound energies in that place alone, I'd say, as well. And then you go up the street, and you go down Abbey Street, and there's an abbey. It was to do with the Connacht Rangers, I think it was. Or it was one of the first abbeys anyways. But there's an awful lot of history to that place as well. And so that'd be another energetically. I've heard different things about it as well that isn't too nice. But I've been in and it's okay. But it's not a place I'd love to go back to. But I know that it's like a vortex for all of these energies. It's the best way to put it. And then you have like workhouses in most towns. So we have a workhouse out another road. So that would have been another area. Then you have Cluna Castle Golf Course. So there's a castle on that site. So there are obviously energies up there as well. So when you think of everything out at each road, there's a lot of energies that make Ballinrobe the way it is.
So what we're saying is that the energy that is there is kind of historical energy that is from lives past where stuff happened that was unpleasant and cruel and people were kept in workhouses, or there was, during the famine, people were starving to death. And it's almost like the memory of that and the pain of that and the grief of that is kind of still stored in the land and in the buildings. That's really what we're saying.
That's really what we're saying. And these buildings then are near houses or not far from them. So these energies are obviously affecting houses and unknown to people. The energy, so like that, as you said, with that man with his legs.
Yeah.
And he didn't know why he had that. Could have been connected to something, but it could be something to do with the land as well. Obviously with the water, but it's there. So it's causing him illness. Yeah.
And there's ley lines, there's sort of a grid of energy, aren't there, around the globe that intercept in various places. Now Glastonbury is sort of a very famous site where there's ley lines crossing, and it creates this very sort of energetic spot, and lots of other places too. And all the ancient sites, I think, were built on places of significance like that. And I think too, lots of churches would have been, their altars would have been built on sites. But I still want to go back, Marion, to that bit for you around, leaving your sort of conventional safe job to work in something less traditional. How was that for you?
It's different. Like I'm still doing it as a sideline to my current job.
I suppose what I'm trying to drill down into here, Marion, is the process that you have gone through in stepping into this kind of work. Because for me, even to say that stuff out loud around my experience with earthbound souls, right? For me, that's like coming out of the closet. And I call it the spiritual closet. Rebecca Campbell calls it the same. That's where I first heard the term, the spiritual closet. And it resonated with me deeply because I felt that I had myself kind of in the closet around that element and part of myself, right? And so I'm really curious about that, because for me, it takes a bit to step out and say, yeah, this is a part of who I am. It's not all of who I am, but it is a part of who I am. So I'm curious about that for you and whether you've had that experience. Can you just talk to me about how that's been for you?
Yeah. Like I was fine in my own circle of friends that knew about it, and even in the group that I was with when I was doing my training or in any of them groups, I was safe, I was comfortable. But then I was doing so many readings on myself. I said, I think I'm ready to go publicly with this. But I said, bloody hell, I was afraid of coming out of the closet, so to speak. I always say I came out of the closet, that kind of way, and didn't I saw a festival Noah was doing his first event up in Donaghey, and they were short of a card reader. I had no business cards done at that stage. This was Tuesday evening. And they says, yes, join us. And I go, oh my God, I have an Instagram page that was only like a little following or whatever. I said, sure, what the heck is it going to do? So I went off and I got my business cards done, had them at the door Friday evening. I got up to Donaghey. I said, this is my first taste doing it publicly with people. They didn't know me from Adam, and I had so many people booked in with me for the day. And I had a couple of skeptics as well that arrived at the table. But they were the better readings because they were like, I didn't have to convince them, but they obviously saw something in what I was doing. But I was connected to the energy up there, I suppose, as well. And that was my first step out of the closet. Now, so how am I going to do the rest of it? So I stuck my toe in the water and I contacted a lady up in Sligo, Boyle area, and she does psychic fairs. So I said, that's right, these are in Connacht. So it's Sligo, Roscommon, Mayo, Longford, Donegal, and Leitrim. So I said to myself, okay, I'll do it. And prior to this, I got my own reading done with somebody at one of these fairs who's a well-known reader, and she's in Donegal. And she had told me that in a couple of years' time, I'd be sitting where she was sitting. And I thought, yeah, right. I didn't think anything of it. So anyways, I arrived at my first fair in Sligo. And I hadn't really told my family much about it, but they obviously saw something online and whatever, and that's fine. So I went off and I did it, but I couldn't get over the response I received. So I said, this is great. So then I started building myself up to have people contacting me privately for readings as well. So I like doing face-to-face for the people connection, but it's also, I could do a reading with you here now as on Zoom, and I still have the same experience. So yeah, and I still connect with you. So
Yeah.
that's where it started. So I put my foot in the world, so to speak, and went on from there. So people started to know me,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite nice now. So
Yeah.
a bit like yourself, you'd wonder how they perceive you. But then I said, well, they can perceive me all they want. I was doing readings in another place and somebody came in and she kept calling me a fortune teller. But I'm not a fortune teller. That's not the way I work. But I think all these old labels are put on people because they didn't understand it.
Can we clarify the difference then? And what's the difference between fortune telling and divination, using the cards and
I see the cards as a tool. I'm only connecting to your energy. I'm only reading it as I see it. Like I have some psychic ability in that sense, but I still wouldn't call myself a fortune teller. I keep thinking of a fortune as like a Chinese cookie, the one you get, the Chinese. I consider that's like a fortune teller. It's a little nugget of information, might be right or wrong. But I'm not going to turn around and predict something for you because that's not what I do. Because you're creating your own future. I'm only giving you guidance on what I can see at the given time that you're asking me in the next few months or whatever's going on for you. But it's up for you with your own discernment and how you use that afterwards.
Yeah, okay. So people come to you and with questions about what's going on for them or about decisions they should make or that sort of thing. Is that right?
That sort of thing. And it was funny when I started first, an awful lot of people came to me with work related questions.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, this is funny. Now the universe is sending me people because I have gone through my own stuff with work, which was the truth.
Yeah.
And that's what started coming. And now I'm getting relationships. I'm getting people like with their career or even their business, and they're not too sure about something. And they'll come to me about it. Or just in general reading, really, as well. Doesn't have to be a specific area. But it might start off as a general one. And then they say, well, how's my finances going? So we look at the finance area, see what comes up, and then go that way.
You said as well that you're a card reader, but you're also all of these other things as well, that you're a shamanic practitioner and that you work with the energies of the land. So, where do you see this going for you, Marion?
At the moment, it's funny you say that because the card readings, everyone seems to know me for that initially, and that's great, and I'm embracing it, and that's one layer I'm doing. But the land is the other area. So I'm trying to navigate that at the minute. How am I going to bring it to people? How will they see it? Because it's a big piece of work to do by yourself. gridding a house. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to navigate that area. Whereas with the energy healing on one-to-one, that doesn't seem to be coming up in person at the moment. People aren't coming to me for that, but yet they're asking me to send them distant healing. So that's totally fine. I can sit here at home and I can send you distant healing the same as if you are in person, and it's the same thing. So I'm embracing my energy healing in that respect. So I'm trying to figure out the land healing is the next part. Where am I going to go with that? Yeah. You know,
can you just briefly talk me through what is involved in gridding a house?
well, we go with the divining rods, as you mentioned, with you, like your father did, and navigate the ley lines. So I draw out a picture of the house, and then we go along with the ley lines and see where they cross over. And then at each point, then obviously you'd have to put in the black tourmaline and the rose quartz. But before all that happens, I'll have to see what's going on and speak to the individual in the house. So, like I said about that graveyard up in Tubbercurry, I came out of that. And the first day I went into it before I went back to heal it. And a gentleman came out to me and he says, "How did you feel about that place?" And I says, "Not too great." I said, "I couldn't spend too long in there." You know what I mean? It was quite heavy. And he said, "Yeah, some people have come out there and I've had to give them a glass of water." And I found that very interesting. So then I said, "What's your house like?" So he brought me in and he said, I knew straight away the house was freezing, absolutely freezing. And he said, "It's like this even with the fire on." And he said, "The dog does be barking and unsettled and he's not happy." So that was another sign. So then I said, "What, have you picked up on anything else yourself?" And he said, "I'd be in bed at night and I hear kids crying and playing outside."
Wow.
There's no kids outside playing. Yeah. So, but now he didn't ask me to, I offered because I was still in training with the school at the time, but he didn't take us up on the offer and that was fine. That was his own choice. But I did give him a Benedictine cross when I was leaving the first time I met him. And I said, "This is meant to protect you." So I gave him that. Well, he was so thankful for that piece alone. You know what I mean? So I said, if I was to go grid in the house and finding the ley lines, I'd actually put in one of them in it. St. Benedictine cross is very powerful. I would add that to the gridding myself. But once I get to know the person and have the discussion with them, if we could pinpoint what's going on, and I might go around the house and pick up on energies myself, and is there somebody stuck? Could be well before he lived in that house, for example.
Yeah.
And then I'd try and do the golden tunnel journey with my drum, is what we call it, so we can send an earthbound spirit over that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I probably do other little bits well with them, but that would be it in a synopsis. Yeah. Yeah.
So you kind of have to know a bit about what's going on in the house in order to get a sense how the ley lines are impacting the energy.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit of that as well, but also obviously I'd be connecting as well on my intuition, and I'd be like, okay, I'd be going my pendulum. I could land in a room and I said, "There's something not right here." And I'd be nearly close my eyes and asking, "Am I picking up on the energy of a man or a woman or a child?" And that could be the case. Yeah. And they're just stuck for whatever reason. They didn't want to cross over. They didn't feel worthy. There's that in it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember being in a graveyard down the country too, somewhere in Offaly, I think. There was just a deep sadness at one of the graves I was at, and I started reading the headstone, and it was a little girl who had died very young. I think she was about 5. And then the feeling that was there was just of deep grief and sorrow and regret. And so I kind of tuned in, and there was this kind of connection to the parents that this little girl had, that their grief was nearly holding her there, and she felt this guilt, you know. And I did a bit of work releasing her and calling in the angels and guides that I would work with around this stuff to help bring her to the next plane or wherever she needed to go for her own healing, you know, for her little soul that had been sort of earthbound. And I just kept holding that space and energy and intention for her until that energy lifted and felt lighter. I think there's probably just so much of that, isn't there, you know, in the world with all these historical sites, and even recent events, I think, can remain stuck in places. So yeah, it's all fascinating stuff, Marion. If anybody was wanting to get in touch with you, Marion, what's the best way to contact you if they wanted to have a card reading or some energy healing or their house gridded or anything like that?
I'm on Instagram at divine.lightwithin, and I have a Facebook page with Divine Light Within without the dots in between. And also my phone number is connected on my Instagram, like a WhatsApp. So I prefer people if they text me rather than ring me, because there's so many spam calls. Yeah, I can connect with you that way. I mightn't get back to you straight away because I do work during the day, but I will make my business to get back to you. And I've met some lovely people at my readings, and I've had some repeat people coming back, or they'll message me, I'm coming back again. That's another thing I'd love to do with my readings. So say if you were having an event at home with you and your friends, I'd be quite happy to be booked in for a part of your evening, and you carry on for the rest of it. But I could do like a little short one of 20 minutes each, so it doesn't take up the whole evening. You know, there's the options that way, you know, bring it more into people's lives.
Marion, it's lovely. Yeah. I'll make sure that all your information is in the show notes so that if anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can. And really appreciate your time. And yeah, and I know we didn't talk about courage, but I do know it does take courage well, we did talk about stepping out of the closet. It does take courage to do that. And so I applaud you because, yeah, it's just lovely to be able to talk to somebody that we can resonate and rub thumbs on stuff, but also learn. I've learned a lot from you this evening, chatting to you. And so thank you for that. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
And thank you too. I also got to know you a bit more as well.
Thank you for listening to The Pebble in My Shoe. As I said to Marion, there were many roads we could have gone down during our conversation. I find all of the subjects we touched on fascinating. If it's mystical or esoteric in nature, I'm in. So to be able to talk a bit about land energy and earthbound spirits was interesting. Marion has a lovely, unassuming way about her, and while I didn't have a card reading with her, I'm quite sure her gift is strong. All her details are in the show notes should you wish to learn more about her work and contact her. If you've enjoyed listening, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. It makes it easier for other people to find the podcast. And if you have a story to tell about a pebble in your shoe, please get in touch. I'd love to talk with you about it for the listeners. As well as hosting this podcast, I'm a personal growth coach at the Daisy Coaching Hub, where I provide one-to-one coaching for personal growth, mental health, and well-being, group classes and self-directed resources that support, nurture, and energize you on your personal growth journey. You can follow me on Instagram at Daisy Coaching Hub and also on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can visit my website, www.daisycoaching.ie, and also subscribe to my newsletter to be the first to know about events and what's new at the Daisy Coaching Hub, as well as practices and resources that support, nurture, and energize you. I look forward to sharing the next episode of The Pebble in My Shoe with you. Bye for now.